Okay, so welcome to the First Friday e-call with K-State Research and Extension. As you may recall, the purpose of this call is to connect the communities with the experts, the education, the economic resources that are available to help their communities. As always, the call is being recorded. Yep, I just checked and it really is. And when it's ready, you will get a link to the website when it's posted and a copy of the presentation deck. And at the end of this call, I want you to know that there's going to be a short survey. It will take you less than 2 minutes. But I want you to think about these things as Bethany is speaking. Number one, did you learn something today that you can use immediately? Number two, how many people will you forward this information to? You may not be the right person, but somebody else needs to know it. So help them get the information. And number three, what was the thing that you learned today that was most helpful to you, which will be helpful to Bethany as she plans her future presentations? And so without further ado, I'm going to pass it off to Bethany. And Bethany, you can share your screen. Bethany is an architectural historian in the Cultural Resources Division of the Kansas Historical Society. And she's going to tell us about Historical Society funding incentives that will help you and your communities. Thanks, Bethany.
Good morning, everyone. As Nancy said, my name is Bethany Falvey. I'm an architectural historian with the Kansas Historical Society. More specifically, I'm the sub-grants manager. And I'm going to be talking to you about incentives that we have in our division, the Cultural Resources Division. We're also known as the State Historic Preservation Office, SHPO. You may have heard before. Our office is, as the SHPO, tasked with documenting historic resources across the state. And all of the funding programs I'm going to be talking about today do require that your resource be listed either in the state or National Register of Historic Places. And across Kansas, we have various resource types like large machines as Big Brutus, locomotives, public utilities like water towers, landscapes and parks like cemeteries, sculptures, and of course buildings like houses, courthouses, commercial buildings, schools, hospitals, and theaters and opera houses. So various types across the state. And part of determining if the property meets criteria for listing is knowing what else is out there and where it is located. So KHRI, which is the Kansas Historic Resource Inventory, is a database that anyone can contribute to. It's managed by DASC at the University of Kansas. But you can search by county, by city. Sometimes less is more with the database. And you don't have to be the property owner to survey historic places. You can put in your own community's resources into here. You just create an account and you can upload photos and information if you'd like. So the first program I'm going to talk to you about is the Heritage Trust Fund grant, and that's one of the programs I specifically manage. The program has been around since 1990. Our first funding year was in 1991. It's funding a per page fee collection by Register of Deeds whenever a property is recorded. No county pays more than $30,000 per year. The state statute mandates that funds are dispersed across Kansas because every county contributes. And half of the funds by statute have to go to cities, counties, or local nonprofits. Over 29 million has been awarded to date. We generally have about $1 million each year to fund grants up to $100,000. Who can apply? The owner has to be the applicant, but you can have community members help you apply or write letters of support. And if awarded, you have to maintain ownership for 5 years following the grant. For-profit corporations may also apply, but it's going to be a 50-50 match versus an 80-20 match for everyone else. The Heritage Trust Fund goes to physical preservation of historic properties. As I said, it's up to $100,000, but you can request as little as $5,000. And this program specifically is not just for buildings. Some of the other programs I'll be talking about today, it has to be a structure. This can be for an archaeological resource that maybe has erosion control issues. It can be for statues, retaining walls, and of course the buildings. It is a very competitive grant because we only have about $1 million each year. We generally can only fund about a quarter of the applicants. We always have more than we can give. So in order for the grant committee to distribute funds, they have to focus on urgent priorities and how it's going to benefit the community. And because this is a historic preservation program, all work does need to meet the Secretary of Interior standards. Funding can also be used to help with architectural or engineering costs, some of those soft costs. And generally projects that address the exterior envelope of the building are ones that are funded, because if you're missing a roof, that's going to compete better than, say, an HVAC update. Not that it's not important, but because funds are limited, they have to go to the highest need properties. So here's some examples of properties that have received Heritage Trust Fund grants. We've got White Cloud, Council Grove, Emporia, and Marion represented. And here's the landing page for the Heritage Trust Fund grant, where you can find more information. We'll be doing workshops throughout the summer, virtual and in person throughout the state. Applications generally come out in late summer, with applications due November 1st each year. And if there's a community where you want us to give a presentation to business owners, feel free to reach out. And we're happy to provide information or site visits in preparation of the grants. The awards are announced at our February Historic Sites Board of Review meeting, and projects generally will start anywhere between like May and June of 2025. So as this is for urgent projects, but it can't be like the emergency HEAL grants through Department of Commerce. That would be something that would be more appropriate for a very urgent, like an emergency. This is urgent, but know that it does take some time to get through the process. Are there any questions so far about the Heritage Trust Fund grant? I can't see the question or chat box.
Oh, yeah, that's all right. There are no questions right now. I put the link that you typed there in the chat.
Perfect. Thank you.
Uh-huh.
So another grant that we manage is the Historic Preservation Fund, and this is a federal grant. This was established in 1977. It's through the National Park Service, and it's not taxpayer money. It's supported by Outer Continental Shelf oil lease revenues. And the purpose of the grant is to assist communities in planning for preservation of their historic resources. So some of the projects that we see often are surveying, like what is in your community that's potentially eligible for being listed on the National or State Register. This funding can be used to write National Register nominations to get the property eligible for some of these incentive programs. It can help with design guidelines, preservation plans, educational programs, conferences and trainings, tourism, planning for disasters. If you have an idea for a project, feel free to ask. So here's just some examples of programs that have been funded by the Heritage Preservation or Historic Preservation Fund. There was a cemetery repair workshop in Lawrence, a driving tour brochure of Newton. Bob Yap came and gave a window repair workshop. Attending a state, regional, or national conference focused on preservation education. Neighborhood inventories and surveys like this one from Topeka, and design guidelines. So who can apply for the Historic Preservation Fund? Main Street organizations, historical societies, universities, local governments, nonprofits. And there's certain communities that are called certified local governments. There's 17 across the state. They get priority consideration because we have to pass through a certain percentage to those communities. But all of the communities listed below or on the screen are eligible. It does require competitive bidding. And it's a reimbursement grant, just like the Heritage Trust Fund grant. But the difference here is you can use in-kind match, staffing, volunteers, etc. And here is the website for information about the Historic Preservation Fund. Applications for this are typically posted in November or December because we're working off the federal fiscal year, which begins in October. They're usually due about March and announced in June. And there's generally 2 fiscal years to complete the projects. Are there any questions about the Historic Preservation Fund?
While people are thinking of their questions, Bethany, can you say, I saw the in-kind match, but are there grants that are readily available for matching of that other 40%?
For the Historic Preservation Fund, this is not for physical work, this is for planning. And so the in-kind staff volunteer time can count for that match. The Heritage Trust Fund does need to be cash match, but you can match other grants like the HEAL grant through Department of Commerce. And you can also stack funding. And I'll talk about that a little bit more, talking about the tax credits.
Lauren has a question. Lauren, do you want to unmute and ask it?
It might be Jen, actually. I'm on Lauren's link because she
Okay.
invited me, but
Okay.
my question is, do they have to get approved? I mean, can they go ahead with the project before? Say they don't get let's see, how could I ask? Can they apply for this in arrears, I guess, is maybe how I'm trying to ask for this.
So for the Heritage Trust Fund grant work, does need to be approved prior to starting physical work. And
Okay,
I
yeah,
can
that's what I
talk,
was,
yeah, and I'll talk a bit more, where there's a potential option to start work before approval, in the tax credit section. Um, so the historic rehabilitation tax credits,
Oh, excuse me, Pam has
yes,
a question.
sure.
Hi, thank you. So with the Heritage Trust Fund, when I understand there's a 20% match or 20% required from the applicant. When is that due? That payment due? Or do you get the funds from the Historic Society as the project is completed, by the month, by the invoicing, or if it's, say, a 6-month project, you only get that at the end of the 6 months? Just looking at money management,
Yeah, and
and does that work?
cash flowing can be a challenge. So part of the Heritage Trust Fund grant application is providing proof of the ability to cash flow your project. So part of the budget is you would break down your project to line items. Each line item does have to be able to be 100% completed before we can reimburse. So if you have a roof and masonry work, we can't reimburse for a partial roof. It has to be the complete roof to reimburse. So, but you can put in for the reimbursement for the roof and then put that towards paying the masonry. So you can submit a project and we can help you if awarded with breaking down your line items to reimbursable projects so that you can help cash flow. But that is because it's so competitive, that is one of the cons of the Heritage Trust Fund is the committee does look at the ability to cash flow the project. And so you have to have at least the 20% match documented, but more is better. Whether
Okay, thank
that's a bank statement or a letter from a funding source. There's different ways to document that funding. Other questions?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I hear you saying that if they want to go for this, you and others are available for consultation ahead of time.
Yes, definitely. So the historic rehabilitation tax credit is not a competitive program. So this is an incentive program, a little bit different than some of our grants. Just a little bit, what is a tax credit? It's a tax credit that pays the income taxes that you owe. It is different than a deduction. Sometimes I like to think of it as store credit with the Department of Revenue. It pays the taxes you owe, and it can move forward for 10 years with the state tax credit. Who can apply and use the programs? It again has to be the owner of the property, and it does need to be listed or a contributor to a district. So there's 2 programs that we manage. The federal tax credit program, we act as an in-between between the Park Service and the property owner. The federal tax credit is a 20% credit for your federal income tax liability. And with the federal program, it has to be an income producing property. So that can be commercial, rental, or working farms. We've had a lot of barns utilize the program. And because this is a federal program, it has to be listed in the National Register. It can't just be state listed. The review process does take time because it has to go through our office and then through the Park Service. And so this one does have a flexible timeline where you can start work at your own risk before you have approval. You can even do it at the end of the project if it all meets the standards, because again, these are all preservation programs. And with federal tax credits, they are carried forward for 5 years versus the 10 years with the state. And it does have to be a substantial rehabilitation, which basically means you need to spend more than the building is worth. There's a formula that you utilize, but it does need to be a major project. The state tax credit is for your state income tax. And it's a percentage based on the community population. The next slide, I'll share the different percentages based on population. And these can be commercial, residential, civic, nonprofits, church buildings, because the tax credits can be sold or transferred. So even entities that don't have tax liability, like counties and cities, utilize this program, and this is reviewed only through our office. You do have to get approval before the physical work begins with the state tax credit program, but there's no deadlines or time frames. It's a rolling application. If you do the work and you submit all your documentation, you'll get the credits. You do need to spend at least $5,000 to be eligible. So here is that breakdown of percentages of tax credits. In 2022 is during the 2021 legislative session. They changed the tax structure to encourage rural populations to do preservation work. So if you're in a community of less than 9,500, you're eligible for 40% of tax credits. So for a $100,000 project, that's $40,000 in tax credits. And Kansas tax credits are very lucrative and generally sell 90 cents on the dollar. So if you are looking to sell your tax credits, that can be an option. And then if you are an income producing property, you get the 20% federal as well. So say you're in a community less than 9,500, 40% of state and 20%, that covers a majority of your project. And tax credits can be stacked with the Heritage Trust Fund grant as long as your match is $5,000 or greater. Maybe you have CDBG funding, HEAL, all of those programs can be stacked if done, correctly, where you've got the match and the $5,000 of your own money going in for the tax credits.
Bethany, can I ask a question?
Sure.
Good, I'm glad you've got that there. So what I heard you say was they sell for 90 cents on the dollar. So does that mean that if I give you 40,000, if I contribute to my community's project with $40,000, I get $36,000 of credit, so it only cost me $4,000?
Yes.
Wow, who wouldn't want to have that kind of impact on your community?
And it's a good way for, especially like counties and cities, the tax credit program, and a lot of the courthouses are listed already. And I'll go into the next page. You can do maintenance work as a tax credit project, and it is the best way to sell. You're helping the budget in your community because you're getting money back for the work you're doing. That's just regular maintenance. So some qualified expenses are exterior repairs, masonry, roof, windows, walls, which includes painting, ceilings, lighting, electrical, plumbing, HVAC, basically anything that's physically attached to the building is eligible. This is supposed to say ineligible expenses. I apologize. So ineligible expenses would be landscaping, retaining walls, new construction, fencing, furniture. Basically anything outside the building footprint is not eligible. And this is where maybe the Heritage Trust Fund grant could come in. If you have a historic building with a historic retaining wall, the grant funds could go towards that versus the building itself. And then here is the link on the tax credits. And you'll see here, there is the federal link. I'll put my mouse up here. There's federal here and then state here, and you can click on the various links. And again, this doesn't have any specific deadline. You just have to get approval before you start work for the state. Are there questions about the tax credits before I move on?
So on the ineligible things, you said grants. So if we're going to make a grant to somebody else, we can't use this money for that.
Right. So you only get tax credits on your money. So insurance, funding, grant funding, it has to be your money to get the tax credits on it, but you can combine the funding to fund a larger project. But as long as you have at least $5,000 of your own money you're putting in, you're eligible for the tax credit program. Are there other questions about the tax credits? Nancy, you're muted.
I have a question, and if you covered it, I apologize. So who can apply for them? Just individuals or nonprofits, or how does that work?
The property owner. So that may be a chamber of commerce if they own the building they're in. It could be the county. It can be a private homeowner. So with the state tax credit, any listed building is eligible. So it could be your house. And some people open up a tax credit application each year, and any work they're doing to their house in that year, they are getting credits for. Like if they paint or put new flooring down, do HVAC work, say if you have a project open and something needs done, you can do an amendment to the application, and that usually moves a little bit quicker than a full new application. And you can have multiple projects open at the same time. It's not recommended, but it is allowed with the state program. Again, the federal is for income producing properties, and it's generally larger projects. So we have started seeing some repeat projects from 20 years ago. They're redoing like a housing project, but it has to be substantial. So it's harder to meet that formula more than once.
So also a private business who's in a historic downtown building could apply for it. And if Laura wanted to contribute to it, then Laura would get the tax credit, but the private business would apply for it.
So the owner is the one who gets the credits. But they can be sold to that individual if, say they're the ones that are providing the funding. The reason they sell at about 90 cents on the dollar is because the person who purchases them does get a little bit of extra liability because their income is increasing by the amount that they're purchasing. Are there other questions?
I don't see any in the chat.
Okay. So the Kansas Rural Preservation Grant, we had this program a few years back. I believe it was 2019. This is a sub-grant from the National Park Service. We applied for it again and received a larger amount, $750,000 in August. We are working to get the applications and program information out very soon. We're hoping by this summer, applications will be out and awarded. Part of the focus of the grant, as the name says, is to focus on rural communities and specifically those that are $30,000 or not $1,000, 30,000 or less population. So that's a significant amount of the state that would be eligible. And we're also focusing on commercial properties on Main Street. So we're kind of working with the Kansas Main Street program, and communities that are designated Kansas Main Street communities will be given extra points. And this is to focus on commercial properties. Because it is $750,000, this will be up to grant amounts up to 7,500 or 75,000, I'm sorry. And this is a 90% reimbursement. So higher than the Heritage Trust Fund. We do expect this to be a very competitive program. I believe last time we had like 80 applications and we had 500,000 to grant out the last time. So stay tuned for this. We'll be launching information soon. Actually, it'll probably come from the governor's office as a press release when this one's ready to go. Are there questions about the Rural Preservation Grant?
Yes. Gina wants to know, does the Rural Preservation Grant have to use properties that are on the State Historic Registry, or can it be any building on Main Street?
So with this program, it doesn't have to be listed when you apply, but you do have to be determined eligible, and throughout the course of the grant, you have to get listed in the National Register. So because this is a federal pass-through, it has to be listed on the National Register, either in a district or individually. State register only properties are not eligible for this grant. But you don't have to be listed, but you have to be determined eligible. And earlier I shared the Kansas Historic Resource Inventory. You can search on there to see if your property is listed, or you can call or email us and we're happy to help.
Okay, and Diana wants to know, can you apply for both the Rural Preservation Grant and the Heritage Trust Fund grant for the same project?
You can, as long as they're not like, it would have to be, say you're requesting 100,000 from Heritage Trust Fund and 75,000 from Rural Preservation, you would have to have like over $200,000 worth of work on your project for that to count. So that could be masonry and a roof. I think it's better to do like it can be the same building, but separate projects, I think would be better. Or say you apply for both and you're only expecting to get one, that could be a potential, and it'll be spaced enough where you could apply for the Kansas Rural Preservation and find out if you're funded or not by the November deadline for the Heritage Trust Fund grant. So you could use some of the same information, maybe even the same support letters for both applications. And say you don't get either grant, the tax credits are always an option.
Great question and helpful answer.
Are there other questions?
None right now.
Okay. And then I've kind of discussed all of the programs we offer, but I wanted to provide some additional resources that we have. On our website, we have various repair videos. We have a preservation consultant and contractor list. There's a link for the Kansas Historic Resources Inventory, some technical assistance, and then our Facebook page if you want to follow along, and we'll put announcements there for programs as they become available. And then through the National Park Service, they also have a plethora of information through their technical preservation services. They have white pages is what they call them on various topics like Main Street commercial buildings. There's one for working farms. They have preservation briefs on various topics. So they have a feature that you can search by topic, like masonry issues, and it will give you a lot of information on issues that you could be having, what are preservation treatments to fix it. And then there's also tech notes, which gets even more specific, like this one's on exterior woodwork. And then I also wanted to put a plug in for our annual preservation conference. I know it's only 2 weeks away, but if you are wanting to attend, it is in Newton, Kansas, May 15th to 17th. I put the link there for registration information. It's $110 for the 3-day conference. And there's going to be educational sessions and networking opportunities with various people across the state. And then here is our general information, email and phone number, and I'll put my direct contact information in the chat. Are there questions?
I don't see any right now. This has been wonderful information. And for those of you that saw that we announced a different program, Bethany is stepping in on a vacation day to fill a slot because her next opportunity is in 12 months. So I appreciate her willingness to do this. And she was just very interested in getting this word out to people all across the state, but especially in Western Kansas, because they are compelled and they desire to serve the entire state.
And there's some counties that don't have any listed properties, especially in Southwest. I think it's 4 counties in the Southwest corner. So that might be an option for the historic preservation fund where you could get funding for surveying resources and listing. So that could come from, I'll go back to that slide, nonprofits, governments. Universities, historical societies, basically an organization of some kind. And if you want us to come to your community, like I said, there's, I think, like 15 or 20 people in our division working on various programs, and we're traveling the state frequently. We also have historic sites throughout the state. So if there's something that you'd like us to speak at, or do site visits to help you get a project going, or figuring out what the right approach would be for a property, you can reach out to us, and we're always more than willing to travel, give a presentation, do a site visit, help with any technical assistance needed.
Fantastic.
Sorry,
Okay.
I'll get back to the, if you email the main email, that connects to all of us, but I specifically manage the Heritage Trust Fund grant. I manage planning the conference, and then the Rural Preservation grant.
Very good. Well, we'll watch for more questions, and we don't mind going out of order if you're just now. Okay, so Mariah wants to know who would be the best person to reach out to about a site visit.
You can email me, and I can connect you with, it depends on what specifically you would want the site visit for,
So,
and what your property is, what the status of your property is, like if it's already listed or not.
so in our department, that the answer would be then use the general email list so that if Bethany's at conference, why somebody else answers. That makes sense for you too, Bethany?
Yes.
Okay.
And I believe our outreach coordinator, Megan Mays, is on the call. She's the one who monitors the email. But we're including her in everything we do because she just joined us in the last month.
Great. Great. Well, we're getting compliments. I hope you can see that people are appreciative of what you've presented today. And I'm just delighted to know who you are and all these great resources. So while the rest of you think if there's something that you want to share, we're open to your sharing. Let me open the, oh, Jerry Kaufman has a question. Jerry. Jerry, can you unmute and ask your question? Or was that a mistake?
I think I'm on now, Nancy.
Okay, there you go.
Thank you. I was thinking about my question. I didn't think to unmute. I'm in Douglas County, and I've had the past year the opportunity to work with the KU School of Architecture, who does have that particular school does have an interior working on historical training students in historical architecture, which has really been nice, and I think a strength in Douglas County. My question has to be, and I don't know exactly how to answer this. It's very difficult to find contractors that understand they're working on historic properties. And I wondered if you see any efforts, an example, technical schools across the state that are putting any emphasis on training construction in the area of historical properties. And I just wondered what your response would be to that, Bethany.
Yeah, and I actually teach in the preservation certificate program at KU. So working on training the next generation, but technical contractors is difficult, especially in more rural areas. I would say if you're around Wichita or the eastern half of the state, it's a little bit easier to find contractors, but even then, some of the big firms don't bid on smaller projects. There are individuals who specialize in like wood window repair, but a lot of trained contractors are getting older and retiring. So that is an issue, and I'm not sure I have the answer for it. I know that Johnson County Community College has some technical programs. UMKC has historic preservation. KU has the certificate program, and they're working on a degree program. But yes, I don't have an answer for you, but that is an issue. We do have the source list of contractors. We can't recommend specific contractors, but we do maintain a list of contractors who have done work on historic properties and are at least familiar with it. And that can come through our Heritage Trust Fund grant. At the end of projects, we ask people in their completion report to list their contractors or consultants that they use, engineers, architects, and then rate them. And then when someone asks, hey, do you have someone in Ellis County that works on buildings? We can look through our list of recent grants and say, well, this person worked on this project previously. You might reach out to them.
So I would suggest too that sometimes these problems are solved at the local level. So if you know a high school or college or any kind of technical trade organization, and you could approach them and say, this is an issue. Are you interested in pursuing? And I'm sure Bethany can help you. Any other questions? Oh, Diana has a question. Can you unmute, Diana?
Hi, Bethany, and welcome back to the State Historical Society.
Thank you.
So my question for you is, we have a lot of historic buildings in Franklin County, and I try to talk to people about the virtues of listing on the National Register and throw my weight in and say, we will help you with your research and we will help you connect you to people. But the responses I get are just people who have a general misunderstanding about what it means to be listed on the historic register. They're really worried about having no control over their property or anything. Does the state have the ability to come out and do a program or a webinar where we can help educate our community first and foremost on the value of nominating a property and the benefits, and also to deal with some of those misconceptions, because I think a lot of people are missing out on funding opportunities because they've got a misunderstanding of what that means to be listed.
Yeah, and Nancy and I were talking about this earlier. We do have a presentation that we give on myths, debunking myths of listing status. And in Kansas, it's a little bit more unique than some other states. We do have our own historic preservation law that any state action or and that goes down to the local level. So that is a little bit different. In other states, if you're listed on the National Register, you may not have any rules. But in Kansas, if you have work that you're doing that requires a permit, that does have to get reviewed. But it doesn't mean that you can't do the project. So there's just some consideration.
So I heard you say earlier, Bethany, that you have a presentation on the myths and you could do one readily. So I don't know what the advantages are, but if, for example, you and Diana decide to do one for your community, if you schedule it out far enough that I can help you with making it visible to the 1,400 people on our list, I'd be happy to do that.
Certainly. And it may not be me, it may be someone else in my office, but yes, we have presentations on myths and benefits of preservation. Since our time was limited, I kind of wanted to focus on the funding, but there's a lot more information to know. And we're all in our department happy to help.
Okay.
So-
Thank you. I will be in touch with you then to schedule something for later this year, hopefully.
Yeah.
Okay, sounds good.
And
Thanks.
if you want to give us a list of some of those presentations, well, I'll be glad to put it in the follow-up too,
Okay,
so that people get some ideas about what to ask you for. This has been fantastic. Thank you. All right. So, other events that K-State Research and Extension has are Remote Work Wednesday is the first Wednesday of every month. On June 5th at noon, the presentation will be on physical health matters. We were in a group of collaborators from Commerce, Main Street, and Network Kansas, and myself went to Sydney, Nebraska to hear about the Connecting Entrepreneurial Communities work conference. And we have had earlier the Missouri person host on this call. Connecting Entrepreneurial Communities is a embedded gathering in a small community of 9,999 people or less. And so if you have a gathering spot that can host 100 to 200 people, and businesses that could host businesses or other gathering places, even empty buildings that could host a workshop venue. People walk from the main event, from the meals and the speakers, to the local sites and businesses or empty buildings or any place. Use your imagination and give us your ideas. We would also highlight the resources from your own community. So up to 8 people would be recruited to talk about the innovation and the entrepreneurship that you're doing in your own community. So we have the application now to apply. The application is open as of now, and I'm putting that in the chat, the list, whoops, there. And Deborah has corrected my date. They are moving the June remote work event to the June 12th. And the link for the Remote Work Wednesdays is in the chat. Thank you, Deborah, for correcting that. If you have K-State Research and Extension grant workshops are still ongoing. The next one is May 14th and 16th. Both of those dates go into one workshop. It's a 6-hour workshop on grant writing basics. We have a online it's all online, and I'll put that in the registration in there. Oh, it's $60. And Annette Kendall from Missouri just told us about their September workshop. If you apply to be our host site, we will pay for and require you to take 2 people to Annette's conference in September so that you understand the concept and the unusual nature of an embedded conference. Thanks, Annette, for being there. If you have an event that you would like to promote, just send it to me at the email that I'm about to put into the chat, ksrecv@ksu.edu. And if you would like to promote these events that I just named in your social media or in your newsletters, make the same request to the same email address, and we'll send you out a social media graphic or that you can put in your newsletters or in your social media to help get the word out. So our next call, I don't see any other new questions on here. And again, Bethany, thanks for stepping in, and I'll wave to you in North Carolina. But our next call is going to be, is your industrial site ready for development? And we actually have 3 people going to present on that. And, oh, Carrie Folletti has an announcement too, that the Rural Champions Grant is open. Carrie, do you want to unmute and say anything about that?
Hey, sure. Yeah, we have the Rural Champion just opened. This is a grant that'll fund a part-time person to fill capacity in the community to get a project completed. I put the link in the website. There is some details about the grant on that webpage. Our webinar for information is May 7th at 1 o'clock, and the registration is also on that webpage. So just wanted to get that out there, and kind of fitting along with this, what Bethany was talking about, our HEAL grant for 2025 fiscal will open June 3rd. So be thinking about that. And the webpage for that is just at ORP as well.
Carrie, do you want to expand on next month's program since you're going to be one of those presenters? Certified sites?
Yep. So with Corey and Campbell with Commerce, so I'm going to kind of talk about the community side and how to get ready and what to be thinking about if you want to put a site in rural communities as well as larger communities, but it is definitely a struggle for small communities. So yeah, looking forward to that.
Thank you. All right, so I always like to leave a little thought to think about. And Benjamin Franklin wants us to know, hide not your talents, they for use are made. What's a sundial in the shade? So thanks everybody, spread your brightness to Kansas and create a great day.